right, guys, I think we're ready for our next one here. Bob's one of the developers at Bezlio as well. He's going to be going over making plugins. So you see the plugins that are part of Bezlio already, Scale plugins, or SQL Server, all that good stuff. Bob's going to show you how you make one from scratch, which hopefully has some ideas about this kind of stuff. One quick note, because this involves Visual Studio, and I'll get into the requirements with his, he's actually demoing it from his laptop, which has Visual Studio on it. So there's a slight latency from slide to slide for the viewers here. So not viewers, just all right. One other note, if you want to follow along, you can use Visual Studio, obviously. You don't have to. The presentation will be available some way after the fact, as well as the code files, if you want to follow along. I'll try to take my time. If there's any questions, raise your hand or just, hey you, hey Bob, whatever works. So the first thing, and if I go too fast, let me know. This will force you to. Yeah, so that one. Yeah, right. So what is a plugin? A plugin is, I kind of see it as the middle layer between your system and ours. You have Bezlio and all the kind of magic performed in the background, and you have your data. But you need a plugin to do something with the data, to get the data, to read the data, to write the data, to post-process, like Brian wanted to do on that data. So a plugin means no matter what you're going to do with your data. And there's some common plugins, Epicor Visual, Excel, SQL, and each plugin has those methods like Epicor has get rows, get ID, SQL has execute query, execute non-query. You guys have all seen those when you've gone through our presentations, as well as maybe make some of your own bezels. So as I kind of said, we made the most common methods for those common plugins. We're Epicor experts, we're Visual experts, SQL experts, but we made those things because those were most relevant to our current situation. But the beauty, one of the coolest things I think about Bezlio is you can write your own plugin to do whatever you want, and actually just whatever. So I have a couple things in here. Google APIs. They have a ton of APIs where you can interact with Google Docs, all their other Google, Microsoft Office copies. Social media, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anything that has an API or that has a DLL available to access their infrastructure and stuff, you can write a plugin for. Weather, if you wanted a cute little, it's sunny in this place, and yada, yada, yada. Or Netflix, if you really love movies, which I do, you can see what's trending this week. I'm going to watch this tonight, or let's see what categories. And I don't look at that API, but they have one, so I'm sure you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. So we're going to make an Office 365 plugin. We're going to walk through the creation, installation, and then connect to a Bezlio or two. Now, if you're going to do this at your office, you have to have access to the environment that BRDB runs on, as well as admin access to start and stop that service. We'll walk through all of that, but this assumes you'll have access to that. So one of the things I wanted to do when I did this was actually write my own plugin from scratch. So I people wanted to use it, and customers, and it's pretty common, email, calendar, all that kind of data. So I actually walked through the whole process and wrote it in about a day, which is pretty cool. I didn't really have a lot of Office 365 API experience, so I kind of Googled that. I found we had MSI, we had 2 DLLs, and referenced them, yada, yada, yada. But one of the things I ran into was actually making the Visual Studio project to build the DLL was kind of a pain. We have all the data hosted on GitHub, but you have to kind of download it and then copy the project, rename it, and withdraw the stuff. I was like, well, there's going to be a better way. So I actually made a Visual Studio extension that's published, and that you can actually download that, and it'll create a stub for you. So most of the hard work's done. You just have to wire up whatever sort of API or library you want to use. So we're going to hop over to Visual Studio. Maybe. It's almost like the animation is like, yeah. And we're going to go up to Tools, and then Extensions and Updates. apologize for the resolution. The Surface Book has a high resolution that I think the monitor or the projector does, so it looks kind of fuzzy. But so here's where you can, and if you use Visual Studio, you can add all kinds of things that allow you to, you know, supplement your development process. You know, so there's things like GitHub extensions, and there's Xamarin. And you can see this is the common stuff I've installed, and there's a bunch of stuff online. So if we go to online, it's going to retrieve, you know, the most popular online extensions. Nobody soon. They already had 4 downloads. All of which are me, but I almost left a review, but then it said review about Schnable. That seemed a little cringy, so I did not. All right, so if you just search Bezlio up in the top right corner, after a second, you'll see our sweet plugin and our sweet logo, and you know it's us. So you click download. You know, this is kind of the license information that we don't really have yet. I just wrote this last week. So you install, and it's done. You're good to go. Let's see. Extensions and updates. All right. So now you can close this, and then if you ever use Visual Studio, you know, one of the typical ways you start is you'll click a new project when it comes up. So up here, you go to new project. And since we just installed this, you can see it's already there. Now, if you wanted to search for it, it would typically be under Windows in the language you want. Now, I would strongly encourage you to do C#, but I guess you can do VB.NET if you'd like. I don't get VB.NET. So we're going to choose a class library, which essentially just means it's going to output a DLL. We're going to put that DLL in the plugins folder. So we're going to name this Office 365. I'm sorry, no, not a class library. That's the whole reason we downloaded that extension. So actually search Bezlio, and we're going to choose a Bezlio plugin stub as the type. And then we renamed it Office 365, and we'll click OK. This will create, you know, I wrote this code file, took out the stuff from the Outlook extension I'd written, and kind of put some comments in here to hopefully guide you guys through if you wanted to write this and hook it up to whatever sort of API you wanted to. And if you guys run into anything or there's questions or suggestions, I put this on the Microsoft extension website. 70 suggestions of how we can change this, or add more code. If you find you guys, you know, when you start this up, you do the same thing every time you go, and you add these 2 methods every time. And we can actually add that to the plugin stub method or code, and then you guys don't have to do that every time. Probably very similar to here, I'd imagine. Cool. All right. So you see there's 2 files in here. There's a class.1.cs, which is a C# code file, and then a packages.config, which tells us our NuGet package required. NuGet is kind of, you guys use programming packages at all, kind of required packages like Newtonsoft, which helps us wrap JSON files. And then I made a NuGet package for our Bezlio Common DLL because it was easier to reference it in that way. We'll step through that as we get there. I'll probably get a little out of sorts with these slides because now most of these are just pictures of what I'm doing. So let's first open this up and take a look at it. So this is, like I said, kind of the stub. You know, it's kind of a basic Bezlio plugin. You have 2 classes. One is a sample model, and one is kind of your main class. So we'll start with the sample model. So what this is the model we would use to deserialize your incoming request. So let's say, you know, in this case, Office 365, you're going to write some methods to connect to that. What you want to do is, you know, you're going to send a JSON object into your method, and it's going to have the things you need to process that. So in this case, it would probably be a username and password for Office 365. And any other variables you might want to say. So maybe you want to do the subject line of emails you want to retrieve, or the dates, range, calendar appointments. That would all be how you structure this. Now I have username and password, and then I have variable 1 and variable 2 here. But you can have as many as you want, essentially. And then you can have as many classes as you want. So if you need multiple models of different kind of things when you process this, you can certainly write that in. And then class 1, which is kind of our generic class, is going to have, your processing. So, we can kind of start down here with our get data. So, yeah,
we built a JavaScript call for BRC, the R, the argument, that's what it's on.
Yeah, I actually go do that. Yeah, sorry. So get data. So this would be your main method. So if we built this right now, you write up some Bezlio code.
I'm sorry. Is there
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I'm sure.
Like the turbo meeting window itself also has a new connection from the upper corner up there. Oh, that's actually okay. Oh, yeah. All right. So let's see how this looks. Is it better, or should we go back to 200? Pretty good? Okay. So get data would be your main method. So if we built this right now, it would say, in our Bezlio code, we'd say, class 1 dot, and then get data. And this would run this code, and then, when you run epicor get rows, epicor 10, epicor 10 is the plugin, and get rows is kind of what your get data is. So you could just make this be whatever you want. You could write, get, put, delete, it's obviously whatever you're looking to do with your data. So right here, remote data broker request is kind of like a BRDB proprietary type thing. But what you're going to do is, normally you would change this to whatever type of request is incoming. So up here we have our sample model. So we would then change this to sample model request equals, and JSON convert is it's part of that Newtonsoft JSON library, and that deserializes and serializes objects, which basically means you take either a JSON string and you make an object with properties that you can then access in this code, or vice versa, you take an object, a string that you can then throw back to the Bezlio. And while we're actually, before we do that, so when you actually first come in here, if you look at your references, you're going to see that it says Bezlio plugin common and Newtonsoft JSON are missing. That's because those references aren't standard ones like system and system.core that Microsoft builds in. But if you just right-click on your solution and click Build or F6, it'll restore the NuGet packages and everything will be fine. And if we wanted to look at it, we can actually see all the red lines went away. And then we can actually see in this packages.config, these are the two packages that we are requiring in, essentially. And again, if you guys find yourself always adding packages when you make your plugins, then we can actually add that into the extensions. That way it'll come in next time automatically. So then we'll finish what you were saying. So sample model request equals JSON convert. And what this does is we're saying JSON deserialize this object as type sample model. So request.data, we'll see that when we actually build our Bezlio, is going to have this JSON string, and we're going to make it an object. So then that way, we can use request to actually run our data. So we know that request up here is a type of sample model, and we have username, we have password, variable 1, variable 2. So let's say we wanted to do, this is just going to be some pseudocode, but string x equals request dot username. So then x would be the username that you sent in. And that's why, whatever you kind of parameters or variables you want in that request model, that sample model, and then how you would use those. So then we would kind of hop through, you'd write all your logic here, and I'll actually bring up the Outlook plugin we're going to write. Just to finish reviewing the stub. So response.data is kind of where you finish it. So then you do all this stuff, you make an object of some kind, you perform execution queries, what have you, and then you're going to say response.data equals JSON convert back into a string, so serialized object, and then you would serialize, now we could serialize X, but it's just going to be a string. And then the data is when you access it back in the Bezlio, so then you can see what it looks like. So I'm actually going to hop over and pull the Bezlio code, or the Office 365 code, and replace it all real quick. All right. So I wrote this ahead of time, and I thought it'd be easier to step through the code itself and rewriting it, kind of in real time. So I wanted to get the mail and the calendar data. So I kind of started with a get mail method. And I guess one thing to point out real quick is important to note, this class.cs name must be the same as your class here, as well as the plugin name needs to match, the URL name needs to match the class here, because if it's not, Bezlio tries to find it through reflection, it's not going to find it. So by good practice, I kind of just rename everything the same thing. All right, so the way I wrote this, I kind of started with get mail, right? I'll expand this out. So before I typically write okay, I guess I'll back up. The only other bit I needed for this was the exchange, essentially DLL, because there's no API for it. You need a DLL, you reference for it. Microsoft has an MSI that has DLL, so I found it, downloaded it, and we'll add a quick reference to it. So when you add a reference, if you right-click on references, and this just basically says, it's kind of the same thing as the Bezlio plugin and the Newtonsoft, only in this case, it's not a NuGet package. It's just a Microsoft DLL they put out. So you download it. Mine's on my desktop right now. So I'm going to add the reference. If you click on Browse, you can click down here, and mine's on my desktop. Microsoft Exchange Web Services DLL. Well, it's on my desktop. You can take my word for it. I'm just going to add it. A lot of times when you're adding these, Bob's talking about NuGet, like when you're adding that reference, you right-click to add, you can browse the DLL file, you physically download it from whatever API is. Well, there's also NuGet packages, NuGet packages or something like that. And you can actually search like a lot of stuff online. So use that as your first try. Yeah. Go in there and search, because a lot of times you just find it, just install it. The Excel plugin, that's exactly how I did it. Right-click on there, search for Excel, and then first most downloaded thing is this Excel data reader, click add, and it took it offline. It did, everyone did. Oh, is it? Oh, that'll be fine. My phone seems to be okay. Yeah. I just shut it down. I'm going to reconnect. Okay. Okay. Okay, so as you can see, after we added our Exchange DLL, we don't have those, the red warning signs anymore. And this is kind of just me. I Googled pretty much. I pieced some of it together. We'll step through it, but we created a new instance of the Exchange service. We set trace flags to enabled and trace flags all because they said you should do that. Exchange.credentials. So this is where you need to specify, in your model what kind of things you want. So I actually went back up here and wrote my message request model. Actually, my Office 365 model. So this has a username, a password, and another useful parameter would be a message count. So maybe you don't want to see all 2,000 messages in your inbox. You want to see the 10, 15, 20. So, it's string, and int. So down here, we take this is kind of where we make a response object. I actually wrote a method for it so we could pull it out of here. So we have our Office 365 model request, deserialized Office 365 model. So now request has those parameters like username and password. And then I kind of screwed over this part, but the response is kind of how you build the response object that you're going to send back. And like I said, it's kind of standard stuff that exists in all the other plugins. So we're saying response equals get response object. We send it the request ID, which is required, and then true. And if you look up here, we have a get response object method that returns the response, and we set a few parameters. So the request ID, compression, which is true, and then data type equals application JSON. Just some stuff you need to set on your response object. There's other parameters, I believe, which were not needed for this this plugin.
Really.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty standard. That's why I left it like that. Maybe if you get really complicated, you might want to change something, but I wouldn't think so. So what I wanted to do was get all the emails with the subject of Bezlio that don't have attachments. And I want to get the top 10 of them. So I actually have 10 hard-coded. I'm going to change that to my message count. So that would be request.message count. So this is just some code. Microsoft has this documented on MSDN and stuff. You essentially create the search filter array, and then to that array you add two search filters. One is, and search filter is part of that Microsoft Exchange DLL, going to pop up and tell you, all the things you can do with it. So it's going to say contains substring, and then you're going to choose the item schema, which is the physical item in your Outlook box, your folder, whatever one you're looking at. So subject is Bezlio. So if the subject contains Bezlio anywhere, it's going to pull back that message. And then we're going to do one more filter where we do search filter, item schema has attachments and false. So we say we don't want anything with attachments, it's going to, it's too much in the server, what have you. And here we actually create our search from that search array. So a new search, we take a new search filter collection, and this is kind of the important part here, is you say logical operator and search filter array.toArray. So what we're saying here is create a new search based on the search filter array that we had, and the logical operator is and. So it's not going to search for Bezlio or attachments, it's going to search for both conditions. You can change that to or. And then it's going to take that search filter array, make it a regular array, and it's going to build kind of like almost a JSON search in and of itself, an object that has all these parameters that you know what to search for. And then you're going to go here. So find item results. Again, this is all part of that Microsoft Exchange DLL. Item is a type of inbox item. So it's actually not a message, they're all items. So you typically have to end up kind of casting them to an email message or something if you want after the fact. So what we say here is our find item results of type item emails equals exchange find item. So we're going to look for all the items in well-known folder name inbox, so only your inbox. And then you're going to apply this search, and you're going to apply this view. And the view is how many items we're going to do. And the search is obviously what we just reviewed given the search. And then we're going to build our object. And I found out the hard way that a lot of the Microsoft Office parameters don't actually get built when you pull this back. So I was trying to just return emails. You know, emails is going to have all my top 10 emails. It's going to have all those objects, but the properties such as like body or internet message headers, all these weird things were null. And when I tried to serialize that, it was throwing me an error. So what I did was I made my own little message model I could return so I could tell it which properties I actually wanted. So I went back up here, message model. So I want from, date time received, subject, and ID. And we'll get to the ID later, which might not be super obvious now. But from, date, time, and subject are pretty standard email informational things. And I thought, you know, kind of what we needed. So I come back down here. And this is kind of getting into maybe more advanced programming techniques. So, you know, if you have questions, please ask. You know, I'm not sure if this means much to everyone, but essentially we're saying I created a list of that message model that I built up there, and I made an email list and just, you know, instantiating it here. So what I do is I'm going to set my email list equals, I'm going to select on my emails object, which contains all the emails we just searched for, and on each one I'm going to create a new object of type message model. So then from, which belongs to my email list, if you see up here, will equal my message, and message is kind of the object we're taking. We're going to say we're going to make a message, which is an email from the inbox, and we're going to change that into a message model, which is, you know, the type that I wrote. So we want the name, who it's from, essentially. Now I had to cast it as type email message because if we didn't do that, it would not know that it's actually an email message. You only have certain properties you can access. So this is telling it that this message is an email message, and we want the from, and we want the name of the from, because the from is actually going to have a whole collection of from data, like email address, inbox, all kinds of stuff. We just want the name of the person who sent it. Subject is pretty straightforward, message subject, as well as date time received. And we have our ID. And actually, now that we have our serializable object, we're going to say response.data equals JSON convert, serialize it back, and we're going to send it back. And that's pretty much it. I mean, now we're ready to build this, throw it in the server, and then we can pull data back from it. Well, the catch stuff is if you run into any errors, and I found this kind of helpful. Sometimes you get errors that Bezlio will tell you about, but there's an error exception with more information. So I've started writing this. This is just locally on my computer. You know, sometimes the error is, you know, object reference, not specific instance of an object. But the error exception is going to be you're missing a field. You know, you need this extra data. So I found it helpful to write that sometimes. So at this point, we can actually build it, and we'll copy it over, and we'll see how this works. And then we'll kind of hop back into here and look at a few more methods I wrote. So we're going to go up here. We'll right-click, build. Everything succeeded. Everything looks good. And then we're going to see our output folder here. And we want to grab that DLL. So I'm going to copy this to my clipboard. We're going to open up a new file explorer. We're going to put this in here, and we're going to see that DLL. And we should see Office 365 as well as JSON, our Exchange Web Services, and our Bezlio Common plugin. So now we have to install it. So Bezlio Remote Data Broker runs the server on the server PC that you've decided to run it on. So as long as you have access to that, you can then copy these DLLs over, and then you essentially can run these methods that we just wrote on any bezel that has that connection connected to your server. So the first thing is that on Windows 7 and above, you can actually just hit the Windows key to search for this. If you hit search and you go to services, this is going to bring up all the services that are running, including BRDB. And we can see, maybe, it's a little blurry, but we can see Bezlio Remote Data Broker. So we're actually going to right-click and we're going to stop this. Now, when you stop it, every Bezlio connection to your server is going to stop working. So you don't want to do this in the middle of the day. You guys are running and you want your data. You don't want to just right click and stop. This is my personal BRDB, so no one's using it but me. So I'm going to click stop. And the reason we click stop is because the service is actually using all those DLLs. So we can't copy things and edit that folder while the service is using them. So we're going to open up one more file explorer. And we're going to basically go to, and I think it's default as C, program files x86, and Bezlio remote data broker. I've not actually installed it beyond this one time, so I don't know if that's a standard or if you choose that, but you basically go to wherever you install it at. It's going to have a couple different directories, content, plugins, views, and then it's going to have a bunch of DLLs in here. So one important thing to know is now we're ready to copy these things over. There's two places you copy things in. Plugins houses the plugins, you know, DCS, Epicor, Visual, SQL, all that kind of stuff. So we would want to copy our Office 365 plugin to our plugins folder. Since it's, you know, a C directory, you know, administrator permission, okay, so that's good to go. The next step is you actually need to copy any of these reference DLLs and put them in the directory above, which is very important. Because of the way Bezlio is written in BRDB and the reflection, it's going to look in the directory above for any reference DLLs. So if you look, it already has Newtonsoft and Bezlio Common because those come standard with other plugins that we've written. It's not going to have Microsoft Exchange Web Services. So when it actually goes to run that Exchange file, it's going to break because it doesn't see this reference. So you need to copy this and put this in the directory above. We hit continue, and you're good to go. You can restart this. So at this point, you'd be ready to run a Bezel and run this method. And one thing I actually forgot while I was stepping through this, but it's really important, it's caught me a couple times. It's in the PowerPoint, which you should be following, but when you actually build your project, it needs to be x86. When I built it against, you see up at the top here, it says debug and any CPU. And the times that I've built my own plugins and run them, it's actually broken because of the way that the other plugins are written in Bezlio Common and some of the other things. So this needs to be released in x86. If we go up to Solution, we right-click on that, we go to Properties, and we go to Configuration Properties. We can actually see, it's already set. It has an x86 and a release option for it. So we should be able to just click OK here, go to Release, and go to x86. Now, if there's no option, you want to go up to Properties again, and you can actually, and there's only one thing here, so we'll go to Configuration Manager, and you can add new and edit. So if, say you wanted an x64 for some reason, which you won't, but if you did for another project, you can go to New, x64, and you can copy from a selected item. So you do, any CPU or x86. Now you only have to do this, like I said, if x86 and release was not an available option when you go to build it. So unfortunately, you have to rebuild this real quick. Everything's okay in the bottom. You see your output, when succeeded. So hop over to our debug folder, but it's actually going to be in our release folder now. x86 and then release. So then we'll grab this. We'll kind of do this thing again. We'll stop our BRDB service. We'll copy our DLL. And remember, it has to be, so the plugins go in the plugin, the reference assemblies go in the one above it. It's copied a couple times, and the error is not exactly clear. So after the first time that you've installed it, it'll ask you to replace it, which is obviously what you want to do. Admin permission to copy, okay. So go back, we'll start this. And now we'll go hop in our bezel, and we'll take a look at it. So I kind of made this beforehand again. So this is kind of a hover table with a couple of different sections. So kind of the thought I had when I made this was, say you had an email inbox that multiple people access, a sales team, a production team, and you don't want to hook that up to your own account on your phone or your computer, but you want them to be able to access these emails. Customers are sending in RFQs, or production teams are getting updates, so you can have all 10 or 5 people looking at this, and then they can process it, they can read it, whatever you want to do. So if we open up sales, we'll have a from and subject and date. So I kind of already added that in there. So we'll go to edit. Zoom in a little bit. Oh. Yeah. All right, we're going to find the sweet spot here. That's less viewing area, but I guess that'll be okay. So the first thing I wanted to do was write my data. Now, I didn't want to do it on init, which runs when you start up. I wanted to kind of click a button and have that get pulled in. So I have a button up here, and we kind of been through this. Button, click equals bezel.functions.retrieve emails, and we can see over our functions we have a retrieve emails. So let's go edit this. And this is it, right? And this is all we need. Bezel.vars.loading is true because when you click refresh or retrieve, you want to have some sort of visual communication that it's loading. And then we're just going to load up what we need. So bezel.dataservice.add. Emails is going to be the object that you're going to manipulate when it comes back. BRDB is straightforward. Office 365 is the plugin name. Get mail is our function name. So if we go back to Visual Studio, we see get mail here. And then these parameters, this is kind of what Brian was talking about before. But this is where you send whatever you want into it, and then it should mirror that message model or that request model on the other end. So we have a username, a password, and a message count. My username is my email. My password I didn't want to show everybody here for obvious reasons, so I actually just put it on ng out init, and I set the value of it there. So it's just a variable in our bezel. And I want 10 messages, or let's make it 50. Now, if you wanted to do something like send and receive date, then you could, you come down here, you do sent date. And then you would say, if you want to hard code it, or you want to send another variable, or maybe you want to wire up a combo box in the front end that you can populate that with. All you would have to do is then come back into here, go up to your request model, and add a new variable. So if you type props in Visual Studio, you can actually just double tab it, and it'll build a little variable creation for you. You do date time, tab again, and you do send date. And then when you build that, then you can send the send date from your bezel code as part of your request. We're actually going to use a different field in a little bit, so I'm going to backspace that as well as that. And we're actually going to take a look at this in action. So our retrieve emails function is complete. So we're actually going to cancel since we don't need to modify this. And we're going to take a look at on data change. So on data change fires, as you guys know, whenever the data changes. So bezel.data equals data response is essentially setting bezel.data equal to whatever comes back. And what's going to come back is that email object. So if bezel.data.emails, we're just going to set loading to false because we have our data now. Pretty straightforward. And the last bit is basically building our UI. So this is a collapsible panel type UI. I won't get into all the details of each of the bits, but essentially the important part is you have a table class here. We have a header, we built our row, so we've been through this, but from subject and date. And we scroll down here, and we have a table row. Scroll over a little bit. And we're basically just going to say an ng4 again, which we know what that does. Let email of bezel.data.email. So we're going to make a new item for every email. So email.from, email.subject, and email.datetime received. And as John alluded to, the pipe, we're going to format our date so it's not ugly and a bunch of time and stuff that we don't need. So we're actually going to save and close. And if we've done everything correctly, we'll hit retrieve. And the little loading is off to the right, but since we zoomed in to see this, we can't quite see it. And there's no data. Let's figure out why. Okay. So there we go. So we got 15 emails, all from Adam, mostly, about Bezlio with no attachments. We see our from, our subject, our date. We can scroll down here. And the nice thing about the way this was written is, say we only wanted 5 emails. We can just go back and click edit Bezel, and just write 5, and then that's all we're going to get back. But you know what? I want to know who's read these. If we're going to go on the assumption that we're going to multiple people will share this, I don't know if Adam or Brian has read these emails. So actually, we want to add a new field. We want to add read. So we're going to hop back into our Office 365 plugin, and we're going to make a new property for read. So prop, double tab, bool, which is a true false, and then we're going to do read. Oh, that's the wrong model, actually. Sorry. We actually want to add it down here to our message model. This includes the stuff in the message that we need. So again, prop, double tab, bool, and then read. We'll scroll down here, and where we built our email list that we returned, we want to send back the read status of the message also. So we're going to do read equals message, and then, but there's no read in here. And like I said, this is because it actually sees this message object as just an Outlook item or an Exchange item. We actually need to cast it to an email message, kind of like we did with the name. So we'll say email message. And now that it sees that object is that, then we can say read, or is read. And that's it. So that's done. Okay. We're going to rebuild it. Succeeded, no problems. So we'll go back through the process. We'll go back to services. Open up BRDB. We're going to stop it. We're going to go to our Outlook output folder. And I always like to verify the date timestamp, which you can't really see, but 1:14 p.m. So we're going to copy that over into our plugins folder. Continue. And we'll go back and we'll start BRDB again. All right, so that's done. Now we need to actually see this in the UI. So we go to Edit Bezel. We can come back in here, and we would add a new table header for read. And then we'd add a new table div, maybe, for email.read. I'm like Keith, it kind of bothers me. So that's all we need to do. So we can go to Save and Close. Go back up, we'll click retrieve. Okay, cool. Now we know if it's read. I've not read any emails from Adam today. I read them all yesterday, except one. But, let's make it a checkbox, right? We don't, false, false, true. It's kind of more programmer syntax. We want to actually make it a checkbox. So like Keith did yesterday, we can hop in here. And we go over to markup and inputs. And since there is no checkbox, I'll kind of do the same thing he did. I'm going to drag this over here, put it right there, and we'll change this to checkbox. And we just need to change the model it's bound to. So instead of bezel.bar.text value, we're going to change it to email.read. We'll save and we'll close. We'll click retrieve again. Now it's checkbox. Pretty straightforward. Like this took me, that part took me maybe half a day to write, 4 hours. Obviously, I do this every day, so, Visual Studio comes pretty easily, but, once you kind of looked at the Exchange code, you found out it's not hard to write, get your email items. The hardest part was realizing that those properties weren't stacked. They're putting that null, embracing the serialization process. If that had worked the first time, it would have taken maybe an hour or two. Building, my own model or my own object for the emails, it took a little bit extra time to figure out, but once I did that, it was pretty easy. So I can see these, but I can't actually see what's in them. So, it's mildly helpful, right? So let's actually make a new method in our plugin that allows us to read the body. Now, the body actually doesn't come along with the message item. So you have to actually manually load the body for each Outlook item. That's just a perk, or I guess not a perk, a quirk of the Exchange reference assembly. So we're going to come back in here, and actually I already wrote that. I called it get body. And we'll expand this out. So it's going to be all the same stuff. Your message model request, your response, but our message request model is going to be a little different because we don't actually want the same model request as before. We don't want a message count as one of the parameters. We want something else. We want the message ID, which is why we saw that before. So message request model is going to have username and password to log into Outlook or Exchange, Office 365, whatever you want to call it, and then ID. And this is going to be the email ID, the item ID that we're going to pass. So each email in Exchange has a long key item ID you can use to essentially get by ID, like you would in Epicor or something. So we're going to create a request, create a response. This is all the same code as above. Most of this is copy-pasted. This property set HTML stuff down is something I was messing around with. You don't actually need it. The important part is right here. So we're going to say email message, which is, again, type in Exchange, text message equals email at message.bind. And that's one method you could use. You could use the search again if you wanted to, but it seemed more efficient to use the bind, which takes an ID instead of a filter, and then kind of like a get rows, but then brings back only one row. So what we're passing into this bind is our Exchange service, our request ID, and our property set. So the request ID is the kind of the unique keys, the email ID. And we're going to pump this back into response.data and pass it back. Now, again, this is a little quirk, but in order to send this back, I had to actually do some string manipulation because it was bringing back the CSS associated with the email message, which I didn't want to see. And I tried a bunch of things, and again, this is the longest part. Everything above this line took a half an hour. It's really easy. This part was just a pain of constantly, okay, can I choose this body point to do a substring and a trim, and it actually worked, which is kind of crazy. But this is the worst part, and this is just something unique to the way Outlook does its stuff. And we have our error handling, we have return response. So, and this is already actually in here, so you actually wouldn't need to rebuild it. So if we go back in and we go to edit, we go to edit our bezel, we're actually going to add a click on our row item. So in the same line you have your ng4 on your table row, you're going to do click bezel functions.load email, and then you're going to send the email. So let's look at the load email function. So pretty straightforward. Same kind of thing. Bezel.vars.subject. I'm not actually sure. Oh, okay. So that, I'm using the subject. Well, I'll show you when we get there. The important part is the bezel.data service to add. Same thing as before, right? You're going to choose the things you want. So email body is the object we're going to manipulate when it comes back. BRDB. Outlook. I originally called it Outlook and realized Office 365 is better. So we'll change that name. And then our method, get body, right? So if we go back and we look at Visual Studio, we see get body right here. Again, the same kind of params. We have username, we have password, and then instead of ID, we have parm.id. Now, parm is what we're passing in. So if we go back and we look at load email, we're passing in the email, right? The whole email object itself. And if we actually go into load email, and Anya went over this a bit, and I believe everyone probably did. Console.log, and we'll do parm. Parm is the object that comes through in a function that gets past the parameter. So let's say I didn't know any of this stuff, and I wanted to know what was in console.log. So we're actually going to comment this out so we don't ruin our fun surprise. All right, so we'll save and close. We'll verify first, make sure I didn't type anything wrong. Save and close. Save and close. And this is kind of how I developed this. This is how anyone would develop it. We'll click retrieve. We'll get our data back. And I want to know exactly what I'm passing into that click object. What kind of information? What kind of data? So F12 or right-click and load or any of those things. So we'll have our console. We're going to clear it to get rid of all this junk in here. And we're going to click. And then we'll have to go back to this window. So we can see it actually passed this whole object in here. So if we open this object up, see if we can zoom in maybe. We can. All right. So we can see this is all the information that we passed from our plugin into Bezlio. So the from would be Adam Ellis, date time received. And like as John said, that's what would show this 2017-06-01 T1S. That's what would show if we didn't use the pipe to format it, which, as John said, is pretty helpful. Our subject, red is false, and then this ID is actually what we want to use. We're not showing it in the UI, but this ID is what Outlook will know, okay, that's the message I want. So if we do parm.id, and we pass that into our plugin method, we can then load our message. So we'll go back, we'll edit our load email, we'll uncomment all this. Change this back to Office 365. We'll verify, save and close. Now it seems like turtle meeting dropped again.
Still showing you online.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
You're just going to rejoin again?
Yep. All right, so we'll save and close. We'll save and close. We'll retrieve, get our data again.
Lost your Wi-Fi or something like that.
Yeah.
Just a blip.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have our data. Let's click on this first message from Adam. Pops up a nice little dialog box, and we can see everything that was in here. Let's go see how we did that. So if we scroll all the way down, we have this little dialog. I believe it's in
markup.
is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So you go to markup and you go to dialog. Okay. You can kind of drag this over. And this is kind of what I got when I first did this. Adam said, oh, why don't you put the content in a dialog? And I said, okay. So I did that. So when I wrote it, I essentially just said, I made a new div. I had to change some scrolling things in order to allow us to scroll inside the div. And I just set the inner HTML equal to bezel.vars.email body. I set the subject equal to bezel.vars.subject, and visible is bezel.vars.dialog visible. So we go back and we look at on data change, we can see when we get back that email body, when the data changes and it's present, we're going to set dialog visible equals true, which displays our dialog, and then we're going to set the email body equal to the email body from our data that we got back. Pretty easy, right? So the last bit I wanted to do, or sort of cover, was, let's say, I actually made a calendar plugin. I mentioned that at the beginning. And we can step through this real quick, a little bit of time. So I want to add another method to our Outlook plugin, our Office 365 plugin. So I want to write a get calendar. So we go back in here, and it's the same kind of stuff, a little repetitive at this point. So get calendar method, a request is the Office 365 model because it's the same thing as if you get a chunk of messages, you're going to get a chunk of calendar data, right? Create your response. This is all again copy pasted, your username, your password, item count. I hard coded to 1,000, but if we wanted to pull that in through our parameters like we did the email, we could do that. Pretty much the only difference here is when we get our find items result is again standard exchange stuff. When we find items though, instead of well-known folder name .inbox, we're going to do well-known folder name .calendar. That's pretty much the only difference. Because of the null parameters or null properties, again, I made my own little object, which is subject and item date. I had to cap the item date. An appointment is like an email message for calendar. It's the standard object you would use. And you throw in the response data. Again, your error handling, everything's pretty good to go. And we didn't change anything, so we actually have to rebuild this. So we go in and look at our bezel here. And again, I added it to refresh. So again, it's the same step. Bezel.dataservice.add, we're going to do calendar, BRDB, Office 365, and then get calendar. We're going to pass in the same stuff here. Now, because we're using the same message, the same model for our request, we have to pass the message count in. But I just set it to 0. We're not using it, but it seemed better than rewriting a new model. We can click verify, save and close, save and close. And we'll click refresh. We'll refresh both of them. There's my calendar. Bezlio today, flying out of town tomorrow, working Black starts on Saturday, all stuff you need to know. Now, I was going to write a method to actually read this stuff, but this calendar object I used is kind of copy-pasted from somewhere. Most of this HTML I didn't write, and you can't actually interact with it from what I can tell. So if I were, the next step for me would be to rewrite some of this so I could actually click on that calendar and read what this thing is. I know what Orphan Black is, but ORPH or ORP doesn't really have much information for me. So I want to know what the detail of that event is. Let's see where we're at. So we built our plugin, reviewed everything, built, reviewed. Okay, so I guess that's kind of it. That's one of the coolest parts of Bezlio for me. Brian kind of talked about it with the cord, but it can talk to anything. It started off, at least it seems to start off for me, this kind of thing where it's going to be ERP stuff. It's going to be Epicor, Visual, SQL, and then it kind of blossomed into this, like, whatever you want. Here's data, or it's not even your data. It's Netflix's data, it's Google's data, it's your friend's data. You can write a plugin for it if there's an API or if there's already a library. If there's not, you can write it. You can write an API for, your Microsoft Access, not that you want to, but you could pull it in, and then you could, write your own plugin, and then you can display that information in any way that you would find helpful. As part of this, we're actually going to be launching a full Office 365 plugin soon. So it's obviously not fully functional now. You can't make new appointments, you can't create emails, but we're actually going to roll that out, and we'll take suggestions about what you guys want to see, but we'll do a whole kind of feature where you can interact with that from Bezlio.
Just one observation. We run a class where Microsoft has basically said everything comes back UTC, regardless of what your regional sections are. What would be really cool is if you somehow recognize what my regional section was, so that when the users are looking at emails, we decide to use it. It's actually in Pacific Standard Time.
Sure. Yeah, great. Yeah. I don't think it'd be too hard to implement. The Visual Studio has in current environment sort of library you can use to get that information, and then you just kind of do a date time convert, plus or minus.
That'd be pretty valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Microsoft refused to do it.
Yeah, well, they don't have to, I guess. I actually converted it to Pipe right away, like to just a date, and the date matched.
Yeah.
So
because that's an important thing, that date time in Angular 2 automatically running local time.
okay.
It actually causes a problem if your data comes back at local time, and you haven't been set the date time that they're wrong. But it shows up that but you have to do random stuff to try to get it back to you. But, the bottom line with that, we'll make it up that it all would have been that the multi-task in your date. Outlook, messages, and try to get the ERP that they'll function that, or make a message your ERP create that. You can match these things together. That's what do that kind of stuff.
Right. I use Outlook or Office 365, but I could add all the Epicor DLLs, all the visual DLLs, all in one plugin, and they can all do things with each other. There's really the only limit is your creativity and then your programming aptitude. That's why we're here, right? So.
That's part of why the ecosystem of plugins is going to expand so fast, just because we can just piece them together so fast.
Right.
But going through and seeing that, it's something dynamic. I have to imagine their APIs can be almost identical to it.
Right.
If you're looking at, CRM and stuff, like, there's one or two things that we're scheduling follow-up, creating activities for them follow-up, but you can have that set, not only create CRM, or only put in, you don't only create an app and Outlook, which is one thing, but we don't only have to go up and still for the either activity, or even their upcoming activities, rather than Outlook and apps.
Other questions? Anything else?
Thanks, Rob. Perfect.